The 15th of October 2020 from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. live on NBS TV and on all its social media platforms. NBS happening now.
Okay, dear viewers, welcome back to this afternoon session where we're continuing the conversation on mining in Uganda, especially value addition. What we've seen so far since the morning started is the various aspects regarding socioeconomic gains, successful minerals in the country, how do we develop them, the mineral potential of Uganda. Now for this afternoon, what we're going to receive from these gentlemen who are here, and one of us who is in Australia, is can we discuss the laws? How do we make them competitive and fair? Okay? What's the best practice out there is what we want to look out for today. And then how do we avoid being the tail in this entire conversation regarding mining? Ladies and gentlemen, with me is Vincent Kedi. Vincent is an Assistant Commissioner, Directorate of Geological Mines and Surveys, Ministry of Energy. You're welcome.
Thank you, William. Thank you for having me.
And then someone who was here already earlier, Counsel, Denis Kusasira. Denis is a lawyer in the mining space. He'll be telling us more. I think you're adding on what he gave us in the morning. He works with ABMAK. Denis, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And then we have Tim Harrison. Tim Harrison is the CEO of Ionic Rare Earth Minerals. Sorry, Ionic Rare Earth Limited. It's an organization that's already doing mining in Uganda, exploration. They're active. Tim, you're welcome from Australia. You're joining us on Zoom. We can't hear him. Tim, we can't hear you. You're getting us? Okay, as we pick up sound from Tim, I want us to start a conversation. Vincent, there are different factors that have been discussed since the morning. Infrastructure, human capacity, technology, innovation. Okay? But to us, who are now watching the mining sector, okay? What do we need to look out for, okay, in the legal space? What's going to make the laws that we're going to pass, the regulations or the guidelines that we're going to pass on the side of government? What's going to make them fair? What's going to make us competitive as a local player in this country while we're participating in this sector? You can tell us.
Yeah, thank you very much, William. Again, thank you for having me. Good afternoon, viewers. First, I would like to just bring to the attention of the panelists and listeners the current status of our policy, legal and regulatory reforms. I think from the morning session, we all heard that we have a new policy, the Mining and Mineral Policy for Uganda 2018, which of course was passed in 2018, like the year says. And then we have now the new mining regulations of 2019, which we enacted to implement an online mineral licensing system. We also, to operationalize this policy of 2018, we now have the new mining and mineral bill. And like the Honorable Minister said earlier, we have undertaken extensive stakeholder consultations. We've incorporated all stakeholder concerns into this bill, and we've finalized the bill. Yesterday we got the financial clearance for this bill. And so we're actually on the cabinet agenda now. We're due to present this bill to cabinet for approval before we forward it to Parliament for debate and also enactment. Of course, after that, we will proceed to develop regulations also to ensure the effective implementation of this act when it is so passed. Now, in regard to the topic that you asked me to discuss, how do we make this policy, legal and regulatory frameworks competitive fair, and predictable, importantly. One is that to make them competitive, I first want to bring the analogy that in Africa, we have had a history of mining for decades and decades, very long history. But in all mining jurisdictions in Africa, the benefits to the country and to the locals has been very, very minimal. In fact, it has been, I can call it a rip-off. So when you talk about competitive, we as a continent must compete among ourselves. What does that mean? We should actually harmonize. I want to call it, let's harmonize. Okay. Records show us that Africa currently has about 30% of the world's quantified mineral deposits. And it has about nearly 70 to 80% of the undiscovered mineral resources of the world. So why should we compete? Whom are we competing with? We are competing with ourselves, actually. So as a continent, we should actually be harmonizing our policy, legal and regulatory frameworks so that we benefit from our minerals. That is very important. So competition has to be about Africa, and it has to be harmonization. You can't compete with each other and we are ripped off. So that is my understanding of how Africa should proceed. And I'm happy to also inform you that these discussions are going on at a continental level, and this is the future of mining in Africa, and these are the future of these reforms in our continent. Secondly, fair. The word fair is misunderstood by many people. Fair does not mean that you come and then you want to operate in your own legal environment or under your own legal terms. The practice in Africa has been that investors come, we give them these licenses, they go and work the areas. After they work, they come back and tell us, well, last year I made only $10,000. I made actually losses. And in the end, it cannot even pay you the royalties or the taxes that accrue to you. Is that really fair? Our laws have been promoting this. What we are saying is, yes, come in with your investment and put in your money, recover your money, let's share fairly in these benefits. Yeah? Okay. I want to give an analogy, if you give me some...
No, you have the time. You have the time.
What analogy is, for example, take an example. Maybe in a mining terms, it's difficult to understand. Let's look at it in a very logical way, in a simple sense. You have land. An investor comes to you that he wants to, say, till your land. And the agreement says that it is on his production that you actually accrue a royalty for your ownership of the land. Just imagine you left this person to work your land. You know very well the person is cultivating. But at the end of the day, the person comes and tells you know what? I have made losses. So I cannot pay you anything. Mind you, you gave him, you have not taxed, for all his inputs into agriculture, you have not taxed. All his inputs into mine development and exploration, you have not taxed. And at the end, the person is producing and is saying he has not made a profit. Is that fair? So what a legal framework should be promoting is a habit of you being on the table, you discuss on the table. When you are bringing in inputs, let's know how much have you put in. When you are recovering your cost, we know the cost, recover it. Now, when we are sharing profit, all of us appreciate that this is exactly the profit we got. You take your share, I take my share. This is what is called fair. And this is the norm that we need to, actually, the culture that we need to inculcate in our investors.
Sorry, listen, I want to come in a little. Okay, we've made them fair and competitive. But what's the benchmark? What's the good practice out there? So that Uganda, we get to appreciate how far we diverging from the continent. What's the world doing? And what's that? There's that delta that we need to look out for so that we align ourselves to the global conversation.
Thank you very much, William. I think that the benchmark really, when you look at our legal framework, especially the one that we are trying to promote as the new, as the future of mining, you notice that the benchmark, it's benchmarked actually on international best practice. If you read other legal frameworks across the globe, you will notice that on almost 90% of the issues, we are uniform and at par. The only unique identity is what I was discussing earlier. The one where Africa has to come in and take its position because we have been treated unfairly in all our mining contracts. So Africa needs to change a few dynamics in this sector to be able to benefit optimally. And in that regard, we are discussing about some of the fiscal terms. For example, how a state participates. You want to participate and ensure that you also accrue optimal benefits. You want to ensure that you do, if you feel that you can't share profit, you share production. These are some of the dynamics that we are trying to bring up. And this is very unique to our continent and to Southeast Asia. Actually, these concepts are not only coming in Africa. We have some countries also in Africa, like, for example, Gabon, Senegal, DRC. Tanzania is also beginning to develop some model. Uganda is also following suit. And we also have Southeast Asia, Philippines, Papua New Guinea. All these countries, which have been having a history of mining with no tangible benefits, are trying to see how best they can optimize benefits for themselves.
So, listen, I want to come back to you. For the viewers out there, we have heard from government, okay? Now, among the panelists, we have one who is active, doing the actual thing. Vincent might be discussing this based on the documents in office. We have one who is actually getting the fingers dirty. We have Timothy. Is it Timothy or Tim? Yeah. Okay, so Tim Harrison is the CEO of Ionic Rare Earth Limited. A little brief on what they do. It's an entity that's registered on the Australian Securities Exchange. Now, we are proud to associate with such an enterprise. Okay, I think they have a lot to teach us regarding governance. They're currently engaging in a Makutu Rare Earth Project. Makutu Rare Earth Project is somewhere near Jinja, a few kilometers out of Jinja, okay? And then they have various places across the world, including Nicaragua, where they have a gold project. Now, Tim, drawing from your experience, there's something you've done in Uganda already. There have been some ups, some downs, okay? Can you just give us a brief of what you think Uganda can do to attract the right investments, the right quantities, the right volume, the right quantums of money? You're also free to give us a brief about your project, Tim. Tim, can I get the sound? Get you, just a moment.
Can you hear me, William?
Now we can hear you.
Great. I've got a bit of feedback, but okay. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown on what we've been doing. So Ionic Rare Earths Limited, we invested into Rwenzori Rare Metals in July of last year. And over the last 14 months, we've been working at a frenetic pace to invest exploration dollars to define what we believe is going to be a very important rare earth project that we believe we can develop and we can bring a lot of expertise and know-how into Uganda. We, as both Ionic Rare Earths and Rwenzori Rare Metals, are excited by the opportunity to develop Makutu, but it's important to understand that mining is a very long and costly exercise. It requires large investment and a lot of risk. So to advance a project from an exploration target to a producing mine, you're probably talking about 7 years worth of work. That's 7 years worth of investment. And as Jennifer Hinton discussed earlier, not always do you recoup that investment dollar. So it's important to understand also that each project and mineral type needs to be assessed independently. Different mineral types require different amounts of processing, different complexities, different risk profiles. So, you know, if we look at what's required to evaluate a project, it's much, much more than drilling in the ground. First, you've got to find it. So exploration activity is not simple. It's not straightforward. It's a science. Once we find the mineral, then it's about understanding, is there an economic amount of material or mineral in the ground that could justify a project? Once we have an understanding of the viability, then we assess the feasibility of a project. And if it passes that assessment, then the company will make a decision on whether or not they're willing to invest the vast amounts of capital that will be required to develop the mine. So when you look at all of the costs and risks that a mining company has to consider, the best way to do that is in an environment where there's certainty. If you remove certainty, you will remove the investment dollar from the mining community. And so if we look at international investors want to have a clear strategy, and they'll search the globe for their specific target minerals. So this needs to be understood, that never has competition in the global resources been so profound. And as such, the competition for investment dollars in developing these assets, it's imperative to understand that in this space, Uganda is competing with many well-developed mining jurisdictions around the world. So if we want to look at how Uganda can advance and develop a mining industry, it wants to attract serious exploration investors who are coming to Uganda with the right mentality. They want to invest, they want to be good social corporate citizens. Serious investment only gets one chance. Failed legislation will drive investment away for good. So to attract the right partners, it's imperative that stability in governance and regulation, clarity on sovereign risk, must be favourable, understood and transparent. The mining industry does not like change. As I touched on before, the mining investment is a competitive market. If we look at the effective tax rate in Uganda at the moment under the current Mining Act, which I must say is a very fair act, about 58% of the revenue generated from the mine is returned back into Uganda.
Sorry, Tim.
That compares very favourably with some of the more well-developed and more favourable mining jurisdictions in the world, such as Chile, which is 56%, Western Australia, which is 55%, Peru, 54%, Zambia, 52%. If you start to tinker with the Mining Act, looking at inflating the fiscal measures and taxes that won't reward mining investment to come into Uganda, then you end up in a situation where there's no international investors wanting to risk their capital, their exploration capital, when they can go to other jurisdictions where they won't face the same potential taxation regimes.
Okay, sorry, Tim, I might need to come back to you. We've heard from Tim, he's hands-on, okay? He's in the dungeons trying to get a mineral out of the earth, okay? But the question arises, do we need to look outside? Do we need to go international for us to invest in our resource? I mean, why do we oftentimes have to raise funding, have to raise capital for these projects from abroad? I'll allow Denis to give us an insight. He's been hands-on, he's been part of a groundbreaking transaction. Why do we need to look outside?
Thank you very much. First of all, nothing stops a country or nationals of a country from participating in the mining sector. But what is also clear is that mineral exploration and extraction is a very capital-intensive venture, and the state alone cannot do all the mines. Okay. The state alone cannot do all the mines. Even if it wanted, most of the time, if it has money, it may not have the necessary skills, technical capacity to do what it takes to get the minerals out of the ground. Over time, the state can build this capacity by participating with private sector, as my friend Kedi has been saying, but it takes time. Hence, we keep looking outside, looking at international companies in their different size, kind of grading, major, mid-tier, mid-sized companies, junior explorers, to help us, because these companies have learned the trade already. They have got the technical capacity, and they know how to raise money for these projects. Because mining is very risky venture, sometimes also it's not very wise for the state to be doing exploration, because it's not very easy also to explain to the population that you've blown, $10 million and you've returned with nothing. So I think it's wiser to push that risk to the private sector. After all, they are the ones who know how to manage that risk. This business is about risk allocation. If the private investors already have the technical know-how, they know how to optimize an exploration program and increase the chances of making a discovery. Why do you want to invent the wheel and begin to do it yourself and begin learning on the job and pay such a lot of money to learn on the job? So it's always the norm that we go for the private sector to help us develop mines.
Okay, Denis, there's a school of thought. A discussion has been ongoing. Okay? We have the National Oil Company. We have a couple of organizations whose parent is government. Is it right for us to source capital or to invest through a national mining company at that point? Because I'm trying to have an arm's length from government, but then also I'm trying to ensure that there's state participation through an enterprise.
Yeah, state participation can come in various forms. One of them is through a national mining company. It's always good for a national mining company to exist if at all the state wants, in the long run, to undertake these ventures. One thing that is for sure is that existence of a national mining company should not distort a competition. If the national mining company is going to compete at the same footing with private companies, it's not going to be favored. You're not going to take away the mineral rights from the private sector who have done nothing, who have not committed any breach of their rights, and hand it to the national mining company. If you're not going to close your eyes, if you're going to close your eyes to violations and breaches of the regulation of the national mining company, then you cause a distortion. But if it's going to compete, the same way we've seen the national mining companies, countries like Chile, countries like Botswana, countries like Brazil, maybe, it's a good idea, because that's the only way the state can build capacity.
Okay, so, because we have a scenario. We have Team's company, Ionic Rare Earth, coming all the way from Australia, a listed company in Australia, taking a risk, taking a gamble in Uganda. Can't Uganda then use some vehicles that we have already created? We have the Uganda Development Corporation. Why do I have to go straight to Australia, Brazil, or US to source funding or to get an investor when I have an investment arm in Uganda that I could use to go into bilateral conversations, and at that point, there's a stake for Uganda. I don't have a wholesome ownership of a foreigner at that point. Do you think we're on the right track if we took that direction?
Yeah, as I've said, that most especially at the stage where Uganda is at, we're at exploration phase, really. Yeah. Early exploration, very risky. I think it's not very ripe to begin thinking about the state, going in to do this exploration work because it's very risky and the state may not be able to explain to the population what he was doing with their money. But if you can look at maybe, old mines like Kirembe, mines like, Chikagati, Tin, where mining has ever taken place, the risk is lower there.
Okay.
The state can go on straight away in a joint venture with the mining company, but even then, in the early stages of those projects, you want the mining company to do the resource definition and updating of reserves for you. Okay. And then the state, you can come and participate at the time of development, as it is in the oil and gas. The national oil company in the oil and gas sector is not been participating in exploration projects.
Okay.
It's being carried free up to development, and then after development operations begins to invest.
That's the time we come in.
Yeah.
Vincent.
But it can stay in to learn without investing any money. It can participate to learn how exploration is done.
Okay. Okay, Vincent, to a person watching us, they are trying to appreciate. Everyone has come before us on this panel has highlighted the high volumes of money required. The conversation was in dollars, there was no shillings at any one point. Millions of dollars this, millions of dollars that. Do you agree with Denis at this point then that if we're going to participate as local content, okay, in trying to raise investment in this sector, we carry on at some point and then participate in the actual drilling, in the actual excavation, when we are very sure of what we are digging out? Or you want us to participate at the trading level?
Thank you very much, William. I think these are very interesting points that were brought up by my other panelists. I want to start with what you just asked, for example. There are, like Denis has rightly said, there are many mining projects in the country. We are talking hundreds of mining projects across the entire country. Certainly, the state cannot come and develop all these resources. It's important to understand that that's not the approach the legal framework is taking. The approach is, let us be together. Let's be joint partners. Let's be together. We have a national mining company taking a commercial participatory interest on behalf of government. So that is what the legal framework is trying to promote. On the issue of risk, let me talk about risk. You see, we appreciate, and we all must appreciate the investments that come into the country. But I want to emphasize that in the current framework, if you invested money, that money, if you discover a profitable mine, is recoverable. That is the emphasis I want to make. It is recoverable under our laws. Imagine our laws provide for recovery of all expenses during exploration. It provides for, it actually zero rates all taxes on exploration and mining equipment. So essentially, you don't pay tax, but also what you've spent to buy or to do exploration, you recover fully. Okay. So this is something, that's a big incentive. So it actually, this is a means of trying to de-risk some of these projects. What we're also saying is, I want to clarify this because Denis seemed to say that government wanted to come and do exploration for all projects. No, that's not the case. What the framework is bringing up is, for some of these projects, because many companies have been complaining that they can't be involved in high risk. So government is saying, supposing we invested a little and gotten some basic geological information, or even detail up to feasibility level, then we attract competent investors, very competent investors, through competitive bidding processes, just like we do in oil and gas, to come and develop these resources. But the emphasis is, that this need not be mistaken. It's not like for those projects where somebody has done exploration on a private level, government is not going to take over your resource. The resource. You'll be given priority in developing the resource. Maybe the only challenge is in the new whatever is just that government might want a small shareholding interest, for example, maybe 15% or so. But it will be your resource to develop. That is what the legal framework is bringing in. And then as for what Tim said earlier, that according to the current framework, apparently nearly 56% remains in Uganda. Well, that is on paper. That's on paper. Actually, when you review all the laws, especially our Income Tax Act, you look at the royalties, you look at the corporate income tax, you look at the withholding tax, you look at the value-added tax, all those when you combine, that's what the figure they're calling 56%. But in reality, the declarations made by the company show losses. Okay. Not only in Uganda, but across Africa. just because you're not participating and you don't know what is happening. And somebody uses all these laws to try as much as possible to optimize benefits for themselves. And that is not what we call fair.
But Vincent, let's think
Just
about it.
one thing, William, I wanted to emphasize.
Okay.
Now, the final one was predictability. Why should we talk predictability? People are saying that we are at the primary stage of exploration now. Why are we bringing these new changes and so forth? Would we want to make a law specific for exploration now? Now, tomorrow you reach mine development, we make another law. That is not predictability. Predictability is make laws now that cover the entire value chain into the future. So that when somebody does his economic model, he knows very well that when he invests over a long term, is going to benefit from his resources, because we have provided for a very predictable legal, policy, and regulatory framework.
Okay, from what I'm hearing, there is effort by government to create an environment that attracts, first of all, the right investments, and then the timing also is key for us, because we are saying the time is now. Okay? Denis, before you run back to Australia and talk to Tim, what's that extra thing we need to do? What's that extra activity, initiative that we need to do to attract the right investment in these projects? Because government has said they have revised the laws, they have thought about the entire value chain, okay? Now, what's that extra thing we need to do to attract, to get this thing off the ground?
Thank you very much. I think it's important, first of all, I want to tell my brother, Teddy, to develop some trust towards investors, because the investors know very well that if they are not being fair, sooner than later their projects are going to be taken away from them when it's discovered that they are not fair. So every investor in the mining sector now knows that we are not even caring about the rates of tax. We're not caring about, that so-called total government take, but we are caring about, fairness and predictability of legal regimes. Back to your question, it's very difficult to make an absolute generalization of what a legal framework or policy should look like to attract investment in mining sector of a given country. The decision to invest in a given country is an individual decision for every investor to make. And it's always a question of which particular project, whether a particular project in a particular location is investable for a particular investor. So you can't come up with a general, absolute criteria, but we know that they are the basics that the investors expect to see and to be enforceable when they are coming to invest in these countries like Uganda. And these are based on surveys that have been done by different organizations like the Fraser Institute, like the UN, asking the mining companies that are involved in this business what exactly they would expect. And they drew out about 23, items or criteria that they follow. But these have been condensed into 10. And you can see if I go through them without explaining that except one, the rest can be somehow fixed. The first one is geological potential.
Okay.
Do we have the potential?
That one we have.
We have, according to the data that we have. So we need to take it forward. So at least we are blessed to have at least the potential to bring someone to come in here and do exploration. Profitability of potential operations. And Kedi has been talking about fairness and and everybody wants to be fair to everyone, but we don't depart from the norms. If you want to be fair as far as profitability is concerned, you use the instruments that the mining companies are being used to collect mineral revenue in the mining sector. The idea of a production sharing agreement that Mr. Kedi has talked about is an idea that is being used, but in very few countries. In fact, if you go back, last year alone, Egypt had tried to use this for gold. They scrapped it because it didn't work. They called a bidding round, same way as we will do. No one showed up. They have scrapped it. Indonesia looked at it back in 1970s. They did a very detailed study of whether this can work the way they were using it in the oil and gas. They came to a conclusion it doesn't work. The countries like Gabon and Senegal have just started using it. We have not tested them. Philippines, which is using it, I don't want to go into where it stands in terms of investor confidence and attractiveness in the mining sector. So I don't want to believe that if we are going to change, you asked me what are those things we need to do. Those things which we need to do are not to introduce very, very, unique things that are only unique to Uganda. Yet we are competing with the whole world. Production sharing, for me, is a non-starter. So most especially, if you are also talking about value addition, you are facing in the different directions
I think
at the same time.
we shall be kicking ourselves in the foot. From what I'm getting, Vincent is proposing that would be an incentive for someone to come to Uganda. But Tim, there are so many other countries out there who have put so many incentives, tax credits on processed products. They have put power specific for such projects. They have opened up infrastructure for such projects. I want to understand, what's the importance of us as a country sitting down and appreciating such incentives, tax, infrastructure, power? What's that extra thing it's going to bring us as a country? Because one would not understand, okay, tax, then what?
Well, obviously, infrastructure is tremendously important. Many mining projects don't get up because of the requirement for significant infrastructure spending. So certainly the level of infrastructure in many parts of Uganda is very favourable, and that makes the potential to invest in mining in Uganda a more palatable decision. But I'll just sort of moving back to one of the comments made by one of the panellists about, making changes to the Mining Act now. The theme for the Wealth Conference is mineral value addition and the future of mining. In order to make sure there is a future of mining, we need to make sure that there's investment in the industry today. And so introducing a fiscal regime that doesn't reward investment in exploration today is something that will ultimately hinder the long-term development of the mining industry in Uganda. And so I'd sort of caution thinking about making significant changes to the mining bill and expecting there not to be fallout. Obviously, any investment in Uganda is tempered by understanding what the potential taxation requirements will be in the future. Now, we don't want to be unfair. We will pay our fair share of taxes and contributions to Uganda. We want to be good corporate citizens in the development of these projects. We're coming into Uganda with our expertise. We want to build a mining industry in Uganda. We want to train people. We believe that we will be investing much more than dollars in Uganda. And in order to build a mining industry, we actually need mines. And what we propose to do is to build mines, to give people opportunities for employment, training, experience, and to ultimately build a platform that a mining Uganda can prosper from. And I think it's important that, the aspirations of looking at downstream processing and value addition are tremendous, but one must walk before one tries to run. And so it's important today to build mines with the right partners who are looking to build a long-term industry in Uganda. And that's certainly been our focus and what we're intending to do through both ionic rare earths and Renzori rare metals.
Okay, gentlemen, I have two questions that come out of this discussion. I'll start with Vincent. We seem not to be very good at copying. Japan, South Korea, these countries don't produce minerals, but they have created an environment that fosters activity in their country. What is your take on this? Because we have it. We have the mineral. They don't have the mineral. Yet they have taken very good steps in triggering activity in their country. What is your take on this? Aren't we really focusing, aren't we failing to focus on beneficiation as a discussion?
Thank you very much, William. I think that's a very, very important question. And that question is the theme of our Mineral Wealth Conference this year, value addition. Many of these countries that you've talked about are into manufacturing. Many of them have had a history of mining, actually, although some of the mineral resources are depleted. So now, their focus was they mined the minerals, they added value, they built their manufacturing and industries. So the point here is that the discussion now going on in Africa is that we've had the same mining happen in Africa, but we have not realized it. We have not realized this industrialization. We have not realized these developments that are happening in Africa. That's why we've noticed that actually the issue here is that Africa has been exporting its minerals raw, together with its value. So what Africa now is trying to do is to ensure that that value is retained within Africa. Meaning that if you mine African natural resources, you must add value in country. So that if you're interested in taking materials for, say, making cars and so on, why don't you take our metals, take our steel, take our copper cathode, take our finished product, but leave us with the employment that is generated, leave us with the skills transfer, leave us with the shared use of mining infrastructure, leave us with education opportunities, leave us with all this supply of small products that are needed in the mine, for example, food, agricultural inputs, cleaning services, and so on. Leave us with that value. That is a lot of value derived for a country. And that is why these legal frameworks have to be aligned with that aspiration of Africa to add value in country. Thank you.
Okay, Vincent, like I said, I had two questions. Picking from what Tim was saying, aren't we spending a lot of energy, maybe I could take it to Denis, on the laws and guidelines on the upstream? Have we looked at the artisanal at that level? Have we invested any energies in regarding regulating or creating policies around the artisanal? Maybe Denis can help us in the legal space.
I'll go to that, but allow me to just add a little bit of voice to what Vincent said. Countries like Japan and Korea, I think you should look at their location on the world map. These countries have got ports. What does that mean? Raw materials, in terms of what is supposed to be processed and the inputs and the equipment, can move so easily to those countries. This value addition, I don't oppose it. I like it, but I'm a realist. I want to be very blunt.
We haven't tagged you as a rebel.
I am not. I'm not going to sit here and say nice things only. You have to recognize that for value addition to happen, it must be profitable. And also, while you can be blessed with minerals as a matter of luck, the happening of value addition is not a matter of luck. It's a matter of competitive advantage. If you don't have competitive advantage, you can sing about value addition, but it will never happen. So I'm not saying it can't happen, but before we get excited about it, we need to be reminded that it depends on competitiveness and other range of factors, including location. If you're located so far away from the port, where you have got no, cheap means of transport, handling port services, it can be a nightmare to go for this. You can look at the history of Australia and see why is it like the way it is. And then country endowment. Do you have capital? Do you have skill set? We can develop that, but first we need to get first things done.
We have you.
First, let us discover that we have enough minerals in the right quantities.
I have skill set ticked.
Enough quantities. We have the inputs to make that happen. Then we can go on. Now, when it comes to You're saying, if I got your question right, is whether we have focused on artisans as well. The artisan mining industry, artisan kind of segment is a good one to focus on sometimes, because the money that the artisans get, it trickles down very quickly. They get it today and they go and spend it. The money that companies get, they have to do the receipts and tell you whether you made a profit or not before they can pay your taxes. You can see Vincent is here complaining that it seems they are always postponing their tax obligations. The artisans get the money today and spend it in the communities, and it trickles down very quickly. But it's not it's not the way you can build up a good mining industry. You can't rely on artisans alone, but you can find a way of promoting collaborative cooperation between the mining companies and the artisans.
Okay, we have a few minutes to wrap this up. Tim, I'll come to you and I'll give you a minute. What's our take from here? What are the next steps based on your experience? What should we do next after this conversation?
I think there's been an opportunity for collaboration and consultation, and I think it's important that we listen to each other.
Okay.
And I think by working together and listening, we'll find a system and a fiscal regime that appeases everyone. And I suppose the best way to probably put it is that, I consider, the initial investors and international investors who have now come into Uganda is a bit like the canary in the coal mine. And so the rest of the world is watching what's happening, and hopefully it's a good experience. We will bring the Makutu rare earth mine to production, and once we can demonstrate that it can be done, and Uganda is a favourable place for mining investment, other international investors will follow. So mining industry is very much an industry where everybody's watching what everyone else is doing, and people will quickly move to replicate what the first mover advantage demonstrates.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. That's your opinion from an investor's perspective. Denis, what do we go home with? Where should we go next? We've had a conversation, we've had the ideas. Where do we go next?
I think I encourage Mr. Kedi to have more conversation with us on two things in this new law. Two things. The rest, with value addition, it will happen if it will. As I've told you, it's not a matter of luck. It has a range of factors that determine it. If it will happen, very good, it will happen, and I'm happy for it to happen because it's good for us. But two things that I encourage Mr. Kedi to continue having a conversation with investors and people who are participating in the sector. This issue of production sharing and the issue of competitive bidding as the first norm in licensing. These are two unique aspects that the law is trying to bring in that are only unique to Uganda, at least in the East African community.
Okay.
And when we are talking about competition, if somebody is coming to invest, they are looking at, they won't look at South Africa first. They are going to look at what's happening in Tanzania, what's happening in Kenya, what's happening in Rwanda. And if they don't find these things there, they will first go there. This competitive bidding, most especially when we don't have enough information about what is going to be the value of whatever you're asking for as signature bonus or whatever, need to be really discussed before we can take this law to Parliament.
There's a war against your idea. I think you need to have a cup of coffee with Denis, because it seems to be the last man standing in that space, opposing it. Okay? Now, you need to avoid being rational in an irrational environment. Everyone is irrational and the other one is rational. Maybe it's the other way around if you do it. What are your take-homes? Don't comment on David's, because I think, and Denis's, we might drag this to midnight. But bearing in mind what he has proposed, what do we go home with?
Yeah, thank you very much, William. I think my take home would be that, yeah, rightly so, like Denis has said, these are conversations that we shall continue having, and we've already had them actually. We've done extensive stakeholder consultation on this, and we should continue having these dialogues anyway.
And take our views as well.
And of course, we shall take your views as well, yes, surely. But the point here is really that as a continent, I always emphasize this point, as a continent, we've not been able to manage these mining enterprises to benefit us as a continent. We have had no benefit accrue to the continent. So when we are engaging these investors, let us have a ground. Africa must have its ground. Whether you want to go to Rwanda, or you want to go to Somalia, you want to go to Sudan, or to Nigeria, you will find the same ground, saying, no, this is how we shall benefit from our minerals. That is the first point as Africa. And you talked about the ports. Like, for example, Japan having ports. Even Africa has ports. We are talking about integration. Africa has ports. If you want a steel mill, you can put it in Tanzania. It doesn't have to be in Uganda. But as a continent, we must see how we must use our advantages for our own benefit. And the other thing, of course, in regard to today's topic, the important aspect is the export of our value of minerals really must be controlled. We must add value to our minerals in the country, because in the end, the value is derived for our people. That's when we actually feel that this sector has contributed. Otherwise, we might get...
Listen, I need to stop you there. We're not safe on time. I want to thank you, three gentlemen, Tim from Australia, Denis from ABMAK, and Vincent from the ministry, for your very unique opinion that has been shared today. But before we leave this conversation, it's important when we go away with an educative tip. Someone has asked, what is a rare earth mineral? Okay, so we have a lot of this. Tim and his team have helped us to identify or explore a mine where we have almost the largest ionic clay deposits compared to China. Can you imagine? We have this in Uganda. Okay, what is this used for? Aluminium alloys, exotic light resources, chemical reducers, X-ray equipment. So I think we need to add value, but we shouldn't ignore Denis's opinion. Value needs to be added. There's opportunity for us, but bearing in mind profitability, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over to Jennifer for the next session, the take-homes are clear. Let's remove the trade barriers. There's opportunity for us, but let's keep in mind profitability is going to be key. Okay? Thank you very much. I would like to invite Jennifer. Jennifer Hinton was here earlier. Jennifer, it's not easy moderating an afternoon session.
No.
But I'm hopeful that the topic is going to add value to us.
It will. It's an exciting topic, and I'd like to welcome my panelists up to the floor. Thanks to the last panel.
Okay.
It was fantastic discussion, and it fits perfectly with every session that we've had today. Actually, in each of the sessions, one issue that came up was for value addition to be viable, to be profitable, we need to start thinking about the infrastructure. So we're going to have a lively discussion about that. Maybe just to make a comment as a follow-up from the last discussion was the concept of profitability. I guess for our Ugandan viewers out there, you can imagine a requirement from government for every mango tree that you want to sell mangoes from, you need to build a mango juice factory. It's the law. And you know, if you try to make a mango juice factory for every person who's growing and selling mangoes, it's not going to be profitable. If you're selling your juice, your splash, at 70,000 a box, and you're trying to compete with splash that's selling at 7,000 for a box of juice, you won't be able to compete. So in terms of profitability, one of the issues we talked about earlier was on production. We need sufficient production because mines and smelters and refineries, you need a lot of mines. So you can't just have one mine, one smelter. We need to think about that. And then in the last session, we talked about some of the legal measures, the financial provisions that make things feasible, make it viable to actually move towards value addition. I have a lovely panel with me. I'm very excited. I have with us today our director, Agnes Alaba, from the Directorate of Geological Survey and Mines. She's my regulator, so thank you for coming, Agnes. We have Engineer Julius Wamala, the Assistant Commissioner of Generation, Power Generation, from the Ministry of Energy. And again, once again, the fantastic Frank Mugenyi from MADI, Minerals Africa Development Institute, Chairman and co-founder. So thank you for coming today. So let's kickstart our discussion today by hearing first from Frank, who will set the scene more broadly, because we do want to get into the specifics on infrastructure needs. Mr. Mugenyi, we're discussing some of the building blocks that are essential to actually making minerals value addition a reality. We've heard some examples today on the downstream from development minerals. We've heard about AGR, but we can't really compare Africa Gold Refinery, but we can't compare gold with tungsten. We can't compare tungsten with copper. It's like comparing pineapples and sweet potatoes and cassava. They're all very different. So first of all, can you tell us what are the value addition opportunities now in the upstream? Because we are working primarily in the upstream for most minerals. And then what does that mean when we're looking sort of down the value chain? Can you explain those potential benefits down the value chain for us? Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Moderator Dr. Hinton and distinguished delegates. I'm happy to be here again. Before I set the scene on what I've been asked, the opportunities in upstream value addition, let me first make a statement that was made by Paul Collier during the mining industry. Professor Paul Collier is well known in the industry. And he told the mining companies, and this is based on the discussion earlier on by Denis and Kedi, he told the mining companies that Africa is smelling development. You are not going to be maximizing profits for your shareholders while playing philanthropism to Africa. And therefore, we need to look beyond. So now the catchphrase in the industry is shared value. We have moved from corporate social responsibility to shared value. And if we look at the shared value, we'll move away from this, we can do it and we can't do it. But let me talk to the topic because it will reduce that kind of tension, because the mining companies in African mining industry are actually, the core business is mining. They are coming to look for resources. They do a lot of investment, and Denis is 100% right. But what is the missing link for Africa? The missing link is to look at the linkages, backward and forward linkages, side stream linkages, horizontal linkages that the mining industry itself, as of now, brings to Africa. The upstream beneficiation that we're looking at has a number of opportunities. And I said earlier on, when you look at the value chain, and Dr. Hinton has set the stage very well looking at the juice, because someone who is growing fruits should not necessarily be adding value. But you need to look at the exploration, geological information, you need to look at the mining and value addition. But in all this, there are industries that a plethora of industries that can be created to support the mining industry itself as we move into developing the skills that Denis was referring to earlier on, by developing the critical mass of resources, because each and every stage of the value chain needs a high level, or what I would call the maximum yield or inputs from the previous sector. So if you're going to add value, you need optimum of raw materials. But you also need other industries feeding in. You need to get who is supplying you. 60% of the investment coming into your economy in the mining, and I'm stressing the part mining because the mining is what Africa has. But we need to look at mineral value chain, not mining value chain. So the investment that comes to your economy, we are talking about, say, 15 billion, is it billion for the gold industry in Karamoja? 60% of that would go into supplies. But how can you supply from upstream beneficiation. So when you look at the countries who have benefited, including the ones that have been referred to, Korea and others, they built the upstream industries, first and foremost. You need to get people who can supply the industry, the products and services that meet the standards of the industry. You are not going to bring people to do the welding who don't know what is the percentage of the welding that is required. You're not going to bring people who are going to supply bolts and nuts, which are going to break into high level of a high percentage of heat because it's going to melt. So you need to build your upstream industries. And it's very important that African countries look at upstream beneficiation, very importantly, and then look at also at what can then you benefit to go into downstream. Now, the opportunities that lie there are immense. You have capital goods that go into upstream. You have consultancy services. You have real other services, business development services. You have seen in the oil and gas in Uganda. To educate people who are going to supply the industry when it starts is taking a lot of efforts. But again, you need people who understand even the petroleum, which is also a mineral, because for African Union, all oil, liquid, gas, and solid minerals are all mineral resources. So whatever takes place in the oil and gas should be the same as in the mineral industry. But I'm not going to go into production sharing agreement because that has been discussed earlier on. But what I'm just trying to push, Madam Moderator, is that the upstream industries provide a lot of opportunities to cater for even to up to 20% of your GDP if you're focusing on it, instead of focusing on trying to tax the mining companies, because here it's not about revenue maximization. It should be about value optimization. And value optimization comes from you knowing what industries will supply the mining industries that are coming to you. But also that starts with the knowledge of the sector itself. But the opportunities are huge, even at the exploration. We have young people in Nigeria producing drones for geological survey. We are going to Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence. There is a lot of opportunities for young people in research and development and innovation to supply services to the mining industry. So the opportunities are immense.
Great, thank you. That reminds me of an example in Chile, for instance. They're not hinging on 1 or 2 or 5 mines. They've got tens of mines employing in total 200,000 people directly, whose skills are all being developed and can translate to other sectors and diversify. So that's a very good point about.
Yeah, but also I can also confirm that for Uganda, who everybody is saying that they were still at the potential, we haven't moved from potential to the reality. Countries like Burkina Faso have 14 gold mines. Mm-hmm. Some countries like Mali have more gold mines. So when you look at the services that would go into those, you start thinking, can we attract more mining into the mining sector and then create more jobs? And then also look at what can we beneficiate downstream? Because there's a lot of mineral resources. And of course, when you talk about adding value, most of the time we rush to high value minerals, gold, platinum group metals, and so forth. But there is a lot of other minerals we can add value to, development minerals, phosphates that feed into our industries that we can work with.
Good, thank you very much. We heard this morning that one of the main costs that go into, well, on the mining side, processing plants. So those plants can be up to even $200 million and be big power consumers. But on the refining side, we heard one of the main costs is power. And the second cost is actually skilled labor, interestingly, when we look at refineries in particular. Where are we now in terms of power generation in Uganda, transmission in Uganda, and has potential growth in the mining sector been accounted for?
Thank you, Jennifer. And for the previous speaker, he has really he has been talking about industries, products. Mm-hmm. I think all those need energy as a key driver. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing to note, I think, in the area presentations, I've seen Uganda is endowed with a lot of minerals, and they're a bit scattered. So on the energy side, one of government's key priorities is to increase the generation capacity and the transmission network. And right now, as I speak, our generation capacity as a country, we stand at 1,268 megawatts. That's the installed capacity. And we have a peak demand of around 700 megawatts. So you can see we have a surplus already. And then our demand growth is around 10%. So what are we doing? Also on the transmission front, we are building a number of transmission lines. Right now, our transmission capacity is around 3,100 kilometers of high voltage transmission capacity. Then also, because we know most of these, we don't talk about mineral value addition, we're talking about industries. We're trying also to put in place industrial parks with cheap and reliable power. Right now, as I speak, we have completed the Namamve. We're developing a number of industrial parks. So we have completed Namamve, we have completed Luzira Industrial Park, we have completed the Iganga Industrial Park, we have completed Mukono. All these are enablers to attract investors, to attract investors to come up and put up industries to assist in value addition in the mineral sector. Then also, as you are aware, mining, as you have said, it's very energy intensive, highly energy intensive. We are highly keenly looking at the tariff, end user tariff. As you're aware, government, because we wanted to bring down the tariff, we did the refinancing of Jagali, which brought the tariff from around 13 cents to around 8 cents. That is during peak time. And then off peak, we are operating at a cent of which is US 5 cents. All those are measures to attract investors in manufacturing industry. Then also, as government, because we anticipate mining industry is a bit energy intensive, we have plans also to develop other capacities. We are doing feasibility studies for power plants like Ayago, which is 840 megawatts. We are doing a study for Chiba, which is 400 megawatts. We are doing a study for Oriang, which is 392 megawatts. All those are energy security mechanisms. Then we are also looking at the bigger picture, because going forward, countries, we need to interconnect. We're also building interconnectors. Already the interconnector between Kenya and Uganda is almost done. The interconnector between Uganda and Rwanda is done. Then we are looking for financing for the interconnector between Uganda and Tanzania, that is in Masaka Mwanza. Then also we're looking at the interconnector between Uganda and Congo, that is in Kenda Beni. Then we're also looking at the interconnector between Uganda and South Sudan, that is in Odio Nimule. All those are mechanisms to ensure there is energy security. Once the mining industry picks up, in terms of value addition, there is adequate and reliable, affordable energy available. Thank you.
Excellent. It's actually very exciting, and Tim even mentioned in the last session that one of the competitive advantages of Uganda is infrastructure and power in particular, and the generation capacity just seems to be growing and growing, which is great. As a follow-up, is there much dialogue between I won't even say ministries, you're in the same ministry, but say between your department and the directorate in terms of looking at this project is advancing here. You talked about geography. This project is advancing in Karamoja. This is advancing here, especially when we think of transmission lines. Are those dialogues happening yet, or is it in the pipeline?
For example, I'll give you an example. We are looking at, we are trying to build a line to Karamoja, because Karamoja is very rich in minerals. Then we're also building a line to Western Uganda. Karamoja, there is Opuyo Lila line, there is Opuyo Moroto line. Those are all lines looking at taking generation capacity to the load centers in Karamoja. Then also building a line to the northwest of the country, that is to Arua. We are building a line from Gulu, Nebi, Arua. All that, we're looking at the potential, mineral potential in that area. Then we are building a line from Masakambarara, then Mirama Kabare. Kabare is very rich in minerals. So we strategically build transmission lines to meet the demand, energy demands, and also projected demand forecasts indicate like mineral value addition is very energy intensive. So all those are catered for. I think the commissioner will agree with me that.
Good, and just one more quick follow-up, because you talked about demand. If you look at, say, an average copper smelter or a nickel smelter right now, that would maybe consume, I'm not an expert on this, but based on the estimates I've seen, say 20 to 30% of Uganda's power generation capacity. has the trade-off in terms of other consumers, local consumers, been accounted for when we're thinking about taking energy away from one part of the population to industries?
When we look at our demand growth, the domestic one is a little bit slow, is a little bit small. Even when we look at our demand overall, the industrial consumption is very high. And when we look at the industrial consumption growth, it's projected around 10 to 12. Whereas the domestic one is around between 5 to 6%. But as you know, the key, to me, normally the big one feeds into the smaller one. Because when we consume all this generation capacity, if we grow industries, we increase our demand, even the tariffs will be small. Even to encourage these domestic users to, to take up connections. Because the power bill, yeah. So it all starts from the bigger consumers to the small consumers.
Good, good. Now I'd like to go to the director. Thank you again, Director Alaba, for coming today. Maybe you can highlight, because we've talked at different points in the day, and I think different people are joining us. Which areas, which parts of Uganda do you see as having really critical, important mineral potential moving forward? And where do you see sort of constraints or barriers in terms of infrastructure? Not just in terms of power, maybe roads, maybe IT, communications, human resources, all those things.
Thank you, Jennifer, and I thank the other panelists for what they have already discussed. In fact, they have already talked a lot, and I also thank the audience for being here at this time. As we have heard, Uganda has a lot of potential, but for us to enhance this mineral potential, we don't need to just look at it in isolation. It's time now we start thinking of the linkages with the other sectors. So if I'm discussing the mineral potential, I'll discuss it in terms of the linkages with the other sector. What potential do we have in Karamoja, for example? If I'm looking at Karamoja, I'm looking at the potential for both high technology minerals, and I'm looking at the potential for industrial minerals, development minerals, agricultural minerals like marble, like limestone. How do we deliver those minerals from ground to the final product, to the factory? And what is the missing link? So when I'm looking at the minerals, I'm looking at them in terms of the regions and their linkage to the other sectors of the economy. Karamoja region has huge potential in terms of gold, metallic minerals. It has even potential for PGMs, the platinum. If we really undertake detailed exploration, we can unearth the potential in Karamoja region. I'm glad to say that we are planning to undertake detailed surveys, first the airborne survey of Karamoja region, to further establish the potential of what is not known. But what is known, we have limestone, we have marble, so you have both and gold and other base metal, potential for chromium. So when you are looking at it, you don't look at in terms of a deposit. Let's look at a regional approach and what industry the minerals feed into. So in Karamoja region, as the Commissioner Energy has already talked, there's really a linkage there, a lack of some linkage in terms of electricity, which is already being worked on. The road infrastructure, of course, there's a gap, there's a challenge to transport the material from Karamoja. Most of it is brought to Tororo for further processing. So in terms of, we need good roads. Even the water requirements, when you are talking in terms of these mineral commodities, in terms of infrastructure, you are looking at industrial, they have different requirements for infrastructure. You look at metallic minerals, they have different requirements. So there's need to zone them and then link them to their the end users. So other than that, in the eastern region, we have the phosphates, which is a fertilizer mineral used for agriculture. We need that linkage to agriculture. As a country, we want to promote agro-industrialization. So what minerals are there, and how do you bring the minerals into agriculture? So you have phosphate, you have iron ore, you have vermiculite, all those, and the rare earth, all those are happening within the eastern region. So in terms of the infrastructure, we need to identify those key deposits with their quantities to have the appropriate infrastructure delivering the mineral resource in those countries. Then in the southwestern region, we have enormous potential. Iron ore, what is the requirement for us to deliver iron ore from ore to metal? We still have a lot to do in the iron ore industry. You need to have the rail to deliver that potential in southwestern Uganda. You need other inputs. Of course, when you're talking of value addition, you are not looking at the resource which is therein, but what does it take to deliver that resource from a resource into the final product. So you have other inputs like coal, like gas, which needs which we need to identify the source and see how those resources can be processed into the final product. So as you know, the whole country is endowed, but as the previous speakers have been saying, most of them are still at a potential stage. And this can happen with further exploration to improve on the current knowledge of the mineral resource which is in the country.
Good.
Thank you.
It's exciting actually to hear. I read an article the other day about the road networks, the power I've always known about, but these things coming together. Do you see, you mentioned we're at prospective stage for a lot of minerals and in a lot of locations. Is there increased coordination between say you and the people in power, the people in roads, water, etc.? Are we moving in that direction in terms of making a coordinated roadmap of what needs to be there?
Thank you, moderator. That is the stage where we are in now. There's now, under the proposed National Development Plan 3, will not act in isolation. There's need for interlinkages and coordination and collaboration with other key sectors that impact on the implementation of some other key activities within other sector. Of course, we have been having collaboration with the Ministry of Works in terms of road infrastructure in the mining sector, even to the extent that we are working jointly in having way bridges, for example, on key mining sites or potential areas, so that we can monitor the productions coming from those key mining sites. With the Ministry of Water and Environment, we have got very strong ties. We have got even joint with NEMA, joint inspections, joint monitoring, requirements of the mining projects for NEMA also to enforce their compliance. And with of course, our brothers in energy, that one is like a family business. And they know where the minerals are. They know what to deliver. And I'm glad that the work is progressing well.
That's great.
Yes.
What I see, you said something really exciting to me, and that was that you're also thinking of other sectors and the linkages, say with agriculture, we think of tourism, we think of how those links can be made. And when we think of mining being a catalyst for socioeconomic transformation for all Ugandans,
yes,
this is actually, I think, an important, very important thing that we need to think more about. Mr. Museveni, Frank, I've known you for some time, and I know you're an expert in multiple things. Can you tell us more about this concept, I guess this shared infrastructure? Could you have a rail line going to Kabale, where the iron ore is the primary client, and that enables other agricultural clients, for example, to be subsidized by that base client? Is that something that we're moving towards or thinking about?
Yeah, thanks very much, Dr. Hinton. First of all, let me talk about the 3 C's, and I will answer to those that I referred to earlier on, that we have competitive advantage, which we want to turn into, we have comparative advantage, which we want to turn into competitive advantage to connect markets and competitively. In that way, we need to reduce our cost of production. We need to reduce the cost of transaction for a business to occur. And can a country, one country do it alone? Yes or no? Even if it was the country to do it alone, and we heard from my previous speaker that they are trying to reduce the cost of energy to 5 cents per kilowatt. But we know that if Inga Dam, for instance, was concluded at regional level, and we talk about resource corridors, Inga Dam, if it was concluded today, the cost of energy in Africa would be reduced to 2 cents per kilowatt. And if we are talking about developing corridors, whether at the country level, to go into resource, we need to look at a freeway. Where there is an energy line, there should be a water line, there should be a railway line. We know very much that years back at the colonial time, the railways that we had to Kasese, to wherever, they were actually collecting raw materials, bringing them to where the hubs were. So if you are developing these hubs, what methods are we having to have shared resources? Because whatever resources there is not for minerals only. It's going to take agriculturalists, it's going to take tourists, it's going to take all this. So we need to really think broadly in how do we develop the infrastructure to serve these linkages that the director is referring to. Linkages to agriculture, linkages to tourism, but at a regional level. We have regional corridors, we have regional power pools, we have regional railway lines. When can we go back to East African Railways and Harbors? When can we go back to East African Airlines? We are looking forward to that to happen, because then you can look at even reducing more cost, but also creating demand for other minerals. You can't imagine how much aggregate stone would go into the railway line from here to Mombasa or here to Dar es Salaam, and how much steel would be required to supply that if you're going to go into that. We had the other time the president saying he doesn't want to have any imported buses. This is an opportunity to create other upstream industries that we spoke earlier. But in terms of shared infrastructure, it's critical that we look at the shared infrastructure, not at the national level, but even cross-border, to ensure that we are looking at how these supply all the sectors. And to do that, at the country level, you need, even at the sub-regional level, you need interaction, even between ministerial, interministerial committees set up, between transport, between energy, between mining, between agriculture, and look at these road networks, look at these railway networks, look at these energy networks. How do they reduce entire reduction of cost of production, cost of doing business, so that we can be competitive in value addition, but also in trade, under free trade areas. Because we have to be competitive to trade under African Continental Free Trade Area, under East African Free Trade Area, under COMESA Free Trade Area. So we need to really look at freeway resource corridors, which involve railways. In fact, roads are so expensive. Why don't we invest in railway lines that actually go into these areas, not taking only resources from that point to the other, but also taking other sectors, tourism, agricultural products, name it. So I think that's why shared infrastructure is very important. Thank you.
Good points. Director Alaba, I'll go back to you. This discussion about regional shared infrastructure, I'm hoping you can comment on that, but also going back to what has also been discussed throughout the day, needing sufficient production to justify downstream value addition, because these things are big, they're not small, smelters, refineries. Have there been discussions with our neighbors about, okay, if we build this, will you send your concentrate from your country here and vice versa? Have those discussions been had?
Thank you, Jennifer Ington. Of course, the way to go is now integration, interlinkages, and collaboration as the three things that a country can do to have the development of the mineral sector. You cannot develop in isolation. First of all, we understand the geology or mineralization does not know any border. We have the same provinces, which run all the way from up from Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda. So if the resources are similar, then there is no harm in having to share the infrastructure and to have some centralized facilities. As you rightly said, the current knowledge of the reserves of the minerals that we have in country now, if it stands the way that is, for example, when you talk of tin, you have only about 3 million tons of tin. Whether it will justify really putting a smelter for tin in Uganda, tin in Rwanda, in Tanzania, that may not be economically justifiable. So there is a need to have talks, to have integration, to have common facilities, agreement to have the minerals within the region have a centralized facility. Like, for example, we can start in country. Iron ore, for example, you have in southwestern Uganda, you have iron ore in school in eastern Uganda, and within the southwestern Uganda, you have the distribution, it is widely distributed within that region. So how do you expect each and every individual to come up with a refiner, a smelter for iron ore? Definitely no. We need to have an integrated plan, but at a country level. Then at a regional level, those talks can be initiated. We have already done some benchmarking to see how things are done in Tanzania, how things are done in Rwanda, and we have agreed on a number of areas, and copy and pasted or edited some of the innovations which are in Tanzania and Rwanda. So I see there's potential to have to really, as a region, to come together and have some agreement on the centralized facility. Because recently, I think we signed an MOU for a pipeline for oil to bring for gas, sorry, yes, to bring the gas to southwestern Uganda. So if we are having the iron ore in the same region, we will share that facility of the pipeline to reduce the iron ore. So that is really possible, and it's already happening. Thank you.
It's exciting. I think it is exciting. It sounds like there's a clear plan coming together. I'd like to go back to Engineer Wamala for a second. You mentioned something about the projected power generation capacity. One thing that's becoming more and more important internationally is climate change, and mining companies, refineries, large companies the bigger company you are, you're under more scrutiny to minimize your carbon footprints and also build climate resilience where you're working. So can you just speak for a second about hydropower is actually excellent because, of course, it's cheap. 5 cents would be good. But can you talk about other sources of clean energy just for some of our international viewers? Because I know even us as a company, one thing that we see as important is some of that potential in other sources of green energy.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's a very good question indeed. When you look at our energy mix in Uganda, it's predominantly dominated by hydropower. Almost 90% the installed generation capacity is hydropower. But then that doesn't give you guarantee because hydropower, as you know, it is affected by climate change, hydrology. We have previously faced a similar challenge. So I've tried to blend our mix in such a way that it is secure. That's why I talked about interconnectors. In our kind of line of business, power business, you have to have always a backup. That's why we're building interconnectors. In the event that we are short of supply, we can always get from our neighbors. But then internal also, we are looking at, we are developing solar on a very high capacity. The moment we generate a big spinning reserve in terms of hydropower and other technologies, we will make sure that we uptake more of solar. And also we are also looking at wind. There's prospects going on for wind. Then we're also doing much in cogeneration. Most of the sugar manufacturing companies are generating power using the waste from sugar. So we are, thermal, we are a bit slow. We're only integrating thermal as an energy security mechanism in the event that maybe we are low on hydro and these other technologies. But we are looking at climate change seriously, and we are more of renewable than the other side. Thank you.
But there's still good progress. We just have a few minutes left, so I'm hoping we can hear some key takeaways from each of you. But one thing I did want to talk about we didn't get to, so maybe you can, I think everyone would have this as a takeaway, is we haven't talked much today or enough today about local contents and our need for building skills and supporting innovation. We heard earlier this morning from my colleague Michael talking about looking at different refineries in the world. And one thing they look at power, they look at, of course, transport, things like that, but they look at skills and capacity. And he was actually quite excited because some of the skills developed for an oil refinery are actually very similar to, say, cobalt and nickel refining. So those are important. So I'm hoping that we can hear from each of you a takeaway from this session, but please, let's highlight the potential. Building human capacity, creating jobs, and transforming, creating decent jobs and quality livelihoods, I think should be a priority moving forward. So Frank, can you comment on that?
Thank you so much. Actually, we did talk about local content, but in terms of indirect upstream beneficiation is entirely on local content. When you talk about supplying mining companies, is the local content. And when I hear that we may not have the capacity and skills in a country, I ask myself, because we have the diaspora, we have the region. Rwanda was very clever. They said, if you have a skill, you come here, you don't need a work permit, as long as you have the skills. So we can capture skills from everywhere, but we need to build capacity, whether at the national level or at the sub-regional level or at the continental level, in order to push for the local content. And the local content is everything from supplying goods and services, employment, insurance, finance, and so forth. So that we have managed to discuss earlier on, but we did not put it in that local content context. But what I think I have picked up from this conference, and for Uganda, and I actually need to congratulate Uganda, is that they have diversified in terms of mineral resources. They are not sticking on upstream, a high level, high value minerals, because that is a contention between the mining and value addition. They are diversifying into looking at other potential minerals that can be value added, because the development minerals that Uganda has proudly invested its time on, the minerals that can be value added and can consumed in the territory, whether in the country or in the region, because the consumption of minerals determine the demand of value-added products. Of that, if you want to have gold diamonds or ring diamonds, you may have to ask yourself whether we have that purchasing power on the continent. Yes. But at the same time, we are buying tiles and building materials, all imported in substandard, when we have the capacity to produce our own. And the demand for Uganda and East Africa and Africa as a whole in building, in construction materials are immense. And these are the industries that we even put forward by the Abuja Treaty and our heads of state to say, let's look at these industries that can build us as a priority sectors. So I want to congratulate Uganda on that. I know there still has some issues on other minerals, on how to go about downstream beneficiation on other minerals. But there is a chance that having looked at the potential from potassium, from gemstones, from marble, from other industrial minerals, then they can probably release on how do we export these high-value minerals to get money to invest in side stream linkages. So that's very important. But in terms of my final remarks, I want to stress on regional aspect. And I know Director is saying there is potential, but we are compelled because we are all signatories to the Abuja Treaty of Uganda, signed in 1991. They have ratified in 1991. They have ratified African Continental Free Trade Area. They have ratified East African Community. They have ratified COMESA treaties. So these treaties compel us to look at regional level to ensure that we can develop these resources to benefit the current generation, but also taking into context the future and the future generations.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Engineer Wamala, some final takeaways from today?
Yeah, Jennifer, you talked about local content. I think we're, as a country, on the right track. I'll talk on maybe on behalf of where I come from. For example, we're building 2 large hydros. We commissioned 183 megawatts in 2019, and we're commissioning one most likely first quarter one of 2021, Karuhanga hydro power 600 megawatts. In terms of, because the government introduced a Buy Uganda, Build Uganda policy, and I can assure you in terms of cement, bars, most of what has been used is from Uganda. Then in terms of personnel, yes, we insist when you're implementing a project, local personnel have to be trained and have to take part. I can give you an example now in Simba Hydro Power Plant. It's local personnel who are operating the plant. So we're in the right direction.
Excellent. Good to hear. And now Director Alaba.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Finally, what I really want us to take home is we don't doubt the potential of the country. And the only thing that needs to happen is mineral value addition. That's the theme of this conference today. And I know there are a lot of issues around value addition, as I was hearing from the previous session, where they're saying, okay, value addition, we can talk about it now, or yeah, let it happen if it has to happen, or if it doesn't, then it will not. But as a country, I think we need to focus on value addition, because most of this, if you now talk in terms of local content, local participation, most of it is coming from the value chain. If we focus on developing the mineral sector in such a way that we have in-country value addition, it may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but it will happen. We need a direction. We need a focus, and we need the right skill in place. The resources we have in terms of potential, but what has to be done is detailed exploration and to really ascertain what is there on the ground. And as Frank has said, when we are looking at these minerals, I think we should start with the low-hanging fruits. Why don't we first start on the development minerals, which has huge potential and the value chain is easily achievable, and then we not leaving out the industrial, the other metallic mineral, but I said we can harvest the low-hanging fruits first as we develop the infrastructure to improve on mineral value addition of the other strategic minerals as exploration goes on. But value addition is achievable 100%. Thank you.
Good. And I guess as my final remark, I'm especially excited to hear that there's clear plans and strategies in place. Looking at infrastructure more broadly, looking at transport, rail, roads. We haven't talked about IT. Local content strategies. I think it would be good to have a conversation sometime, especially thinking about innovation that's needed. So building skills in some areas, but what we do know internationally with value addition is if we look at beneficiation, there's different expertises for every mineral value chain. So maybe being a bit strategic about the differences between each value chain and mapping out what needs to happen there in terms of human resources and training, as well as with respect to all these things that need to come together. I'm looking forward to the 5 cents on energy, which is good for, it's good for mining too. And I guess as a final comment, I think we're moving next towards talking about the future of mining in Uganda. Very soon we'll have a video from the African Gold Refinery. So before you go anywhere, stay tuned for that video. And then afterwards, we'll be talking about the future of mining and some really important topics that will determine what direction the mining sector is going in the long term. And so I thank you all for joining us today. I wish you a lovely afternoon. And thank you to my beautiful panel. Thank you, everyone.
Gold has been explored, mined and traded in Uganda, Africa and especially in our region for hundreds of years. Most of the gold is exported out of the region in raw form. 2014, African Gold Refinery was established in Uganda. African Gold Refinery's venture is the first initiative in the region to offer the transparency. African Gold Refinery's state-of-the-art refining facilities offers the highest quality standards in line with refining, assaying, manufacturing, as well as serving the mining industry in the African continent. African Gold Refinery accepts supplies from legally established companies. The scrap bars are remelted in order to do the deep sampling thereafter. Samples will be sent to the laboratory for testing the purity of the gold through fire assay and ICP. The geochemical laboratory will serve the local and regional gold mining industry with certified analysis of soil samples. Analysis can be carried out by locally trained certified Ugandan AGR assayers in Entebbe. African Gold Refinery uses the proven aqua regia method. This chemical process removes the impurities from the precious metals by dissolving them. The end product is extremely pure bullion, which can be casted in finished line bars or jewels. Gold bars of this standard can be considered not only as a commodity, but also at the same time as a currency.
Compliance, transparency, and integrity are the main foundation of African Gold Refinery. AGR is committed in creating progressive initiatives to its operations and services, contributing to the improvement of the customer and the communities.
The presence of AGR has impacted on Entebbe Municipal Council via the employment opportunities it has accorded the residents and Ugandans.
AGR is very proud of the economic benefication we are bringing to Uganda and the region, such as dramatic rise of transparency in the gold sector, job creation, vital transfer of technology and skills, and more.
I'm one of the beneficiaries, and the salary that I'm being paid, it has managed and it has enabled me to raise my standard of living. I've managed to get and acquire new skills that has enabled me to manage to run the administrative part of the employment, being a new type of venture into the country.
But in addition to that, the presence of African Gold Refinery has impacted on the community of Entebbe through the social corporate responsibility programs that they are rolling out to the community of Entebbe.
We used to have 4 proper classrooms, and the other 2 were being taught on the veranda. We also used to have 2 toilets, but now with the help of African Gold Refinery, we have got 80 classrooms and 10 toilets. Right now we can bring in more children because we have got enough classrooms where to teach them from.
Every other month, AGR makes provisions for this school to make sure that the disabled children live a comfortable life, that they don't regret their disability, but rather feel that they're part of our community.
Regardless of certain challenges that the company is facing, we are very optimistic for a promising future, and we have put this in belief to action by keep investing in Uganda and expanding our social responsibility program.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the last segment of this important conference, the 9th Annual Mineral Wealth Conference, organized by Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum and a large number of partners. We are going to be discussing mineral value addition and the way forward. Where do we want to take this country in terms of the mining sector? And I'm very pleased to be joined today by three very distinguished panelists. I have Ms. Gloria Mugambe, who is the head of the National Extractive EITI, sorry, the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. That's the Secretariat in the Ministry of Finance. We have Ms. Sharon Tem, who is the acting CEO of the Africa Gold Refinery. And we have Mr. Chris Lubanga-Kene, who is an Assistant Commissioner in charge of labs at the Directorate of Geological Surveys and Mines of Uganda. The panelists here will be taking us through a very lively discussion. We'll be discussing growth in the demand of green energy, minerals. We will be discussing transparency in the mineral sector and what this means for the public at large, but above all, the kind of reporting protocols for the government of Uganda. We'll also discuss gold as a currency or reserve, and then we'll discuss Uganda's potential for green energy minerals, through which will be taken by Mr. Chris Lubanga-Kene. We will be discussing all these matters with the panelists here, and I am pleased to host them this evening. My name is Nicholas Echimu. I am here in my capacity as a council member of the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, where I render legal advice. All of you have probably followed the previous speakers, and it's been a very lively debate about where I want to see our mineral sector go as a country. And we've received very many questions, with people asking, what is the future of minerals in Uganda? Where do we want to go? And I think for us to open up this afternoon, we'll just ask Mr. Chris Lubanga-Kene. We are seeing another important initiative that is sweeping across the world, and that is extractive industry transparency. And Uganda recently became a signatory to this important initiative. Maybe before I call upon Chris, it would just be good to get a few comments from Gloria about what EITI is for the people listening and watching us this afternoon, and what it means for the government of Uganda and its peoples, and what we should expect from the Secretariat. Thank you, Madam Gloria.
Thank you, Nicholas. EITI stands for the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. It's a global initiative that started in 2003. It came from the need. It was brought together by companies, civil society, and governments. They felt the need for more transparency around revenue management in extractives. How much companies said they were paying and how much government said they were receiving. But since that time, it has evolved to cover the whole extractive chain, including contracts and production. So Uganda became an EITI member on 12th August 2020, so we've just become a member. We're the 53rd member of EITI, and we're the 26th country in Africa to join. What EITI does is that it sets a global standard for how extractives should be managed nationally. So we have what is called an EITI standard, and this is a set of criteria that defines international best practice in extractive management along the whole value chain of extractives. So from the contract that is signed to the production of the mineral or the oil or whatever natural resource you may have, to the revenue, how much do you get from this extractive, and then to the allocation of that revenue, and also to how it is spent and how it benefits ultimately the nationals of that country. So the standard sets out clearly how a country should manage its sector in each of those, under each of those criteria. So what happens is that a country comes together, we have what is called an MSG, the steering committee of the program in the country, and they define the challenges facing the sector, And based on those challenges, they work out a work plan which will address those challenges in line with the standard. So what we do is, what it is that we are now members of an exclusive club that is subscribing to international best practice in the management of extractives.
Thank you very much for that brief introduction. I suppose that most, if not all of us now know what the initiative is all about and what we have to expect from it. Chris from DGSM, we just wanted to find out, in practical terms, what does revenue transparency mean for government? Exactly.
Thank you, Nicholas, and the delegates out there. Good afternoon. Of course, the coming on board of the country into the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative is something that is quite timely, because it comes with requirements for transparency and of course, accountability. And this is something that has been sought by the public and especially civil society. And also the public has been yearning for information. And that information has been available, but of course the accessibility has been the problem. So with these provisions that Gloria alluded to, of course the government will be required to make sure that information is available to the public. And also it helps us, of course, and also we as government to really make sure that we do things that please the public, and of course all the things that we do as government is for the public and all other stakeholders. So if, for instance, we identify the challenges that are affecting us from delivering according to what we're supposed to do, and we work upon them, then also we have to report back to the public on that. Then, of course, talked about accessibility to information. EIT, of course, requires us, of course, especially the extractive industry, to us to of course, account on how we are using the revenues we are getting from these extractives. So, of course, at the end of a period, maybe a financial year, we have to make declarations. For instance, the mining industry, if we have gotten certain revenues from the mining companies, how is government using it? And also, it's very timely, of course, for us in this phase. Of course, the government currently is fast-tracking the Mining and Minerals Bill to 2020, which has some certain provisions, which, of course, need very good monitoring. For instance, for the communities, there's requirements by the mining companies to of course, enter into community development agreements. And also, we as government, of course, also we are coming up with things to do, such as production sharing. So all that has to do with, of course, earnings, additional earnings to the government, and we need to really invest them wisely. And also, we need to avail that information to the public, and they don't have issue with us. That's the always had it. Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, and I think that is very reassuring for the public to know that government is committed to transparency, and we will get to know what our money is exactly used for that arise from the extractive industry. I think just moving forward a little bit, we will talk about green minerals and the mineral value addition in that regard. But first, it's important that we discuss and understand what the views of the African Gold Refinery is, as somebody that has been, or an entity that's been in this country for a while, undertaking mineral beneficiation in the context of our discussion this evening. Sharon, maybe we can have some comment from you and AGR on what you're doing, so that people know what AGR is doing exactly.
Thank you, Nicholas. In AGR, we are focused on refining. What is extracted is what we are refining. So we are looking at extraction, we are looking at value addition of minerals, especially precious minerals, by precious minerals, metals. But the bulk of what we are doing is actually gold. So yes, that is majorly what we are doing. And of course, exporting it out, because we still do not have a domestic market here to absorb our refined gold bars.
So basically, viewers, I think as Ugandans, probably we don't have the purchasing capacity to try and partake of all these minerals that are being beneficiated in Uganda. But I think in the context of our discussion today, it would just be good to know, how big is the refinery? That is if it is not classified, obviously. How many people you employ? to which countries you ordinarily export some of these products that you...
The refinery is having, we are having a capacity of 600 kilograms of gold refined a day. That's our capacity. We export about 1 ton, approximately a ton a month. Factors constant, we do a ton a month. But you surely know, Uganda is exporting much more than just 1 ton a month. There is another bulk that is coming from, I don't know, other players in the sector. But we are employing a workforce of about 85, 83. That is to do, we have skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled labor force. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Sharon. I think our viewers would also like to know this evening what Uganda can do to develop its own gold reserve. We've seen countries having, various ways of keeping value, and we know that gold reserves are one of those ways of keeping value. I don't know whether AGR has had any discussions with government in the context of trying to take us down the alley of having our own reserves, especially now that we have, facilities to beneficiate them in Uganda, and we do have the minerals in Uganda.
There are so many things the country can do in order to build a gold reserve. A gold reserve is actually the quantity of gold held by the central bank to back up its currency. We would start with the supply. I would like to start as basic as possible. The supply of gold. If the country can begin to legislate, take an example of Tanzania. Our neighbors, they are the 4th largest gold producers. They have actually, I think they're about to complete construction of their gold refinery. But the rationale behind construction of that gold refinery in Dodoma, the president is already saying it, is for them to build a gold reserve. They want to, but if you see a gold reserve, most of the gold that is going to be put in the gold reserve equally is required by the nation to supply certain sectors, and it's a win-win situation. But for what our country can do in order to build a gold reserve, first and foremost, we need to give capacity to the sector. Most of our gold is underground, is in the ground. We need to begin to facilitate. The state needs to begin to finance all its surveys, we do not need to have foreigners coming into the country, doing surveys, finding out where the gold deposits are, getting foreigners to come and extract it from down. I think if we begin to own the process, right from the point of surveying, we have structures, then we begin to possess it. And once we own the gold, then it's easier to build up a gold reserve.
So thank you very much, Sharon. That is very encouraging and probably enlightening as well. And we hope that the powers that be can consult people like you in terms of where they want to go in terms of developing these reserves. I think to my brother Chris, I just want to find out, is government currently evaluating this potential of setting up a gold reserve, and what are we doing before we take any next steps to making it come alive?
Thank you, Nicholas and Sharon. I think I have a different opinion about holding a gold reserve, because the government or the country can have a gold reserve either within the country or even in any other country. So, for instance, if this is something that the government and the central bank, on a continuous basis, of course, reviews if it has its foreign reserves anyway, it sees whether it's performing well or not, and whether to hold them in terms of gold reserves in whatever holding bank it is holding it, or to maintain them in the form of the paper currency. Because at times you may not be earning the appropriate interest rates on those reserves you're holding in the foreign banks. But also, of course, it's very important, because for the government to hold it within its own country. But of course, currently we are lacking the legal framework. I don't think the Financial Institutions Act provides for financial institutions in Uganda to do bullion banking. But of course, with the emergence of refineries, in addition to Nigeria, currently we have additional 3 refineries. We are going to 4. So we're having all this gold that is from within the country and from the region. So I think it is time also we started thinking of bullion banking within the country, because all this gold ends up somewhere. It's held in a reserve somewhere. And also with the bill that I talked about earlier, the Mining and Minerals Bill, we are also to regulate refining. So we shall be requiring the refiners to produce good delivery gold. That is bullion gold. That's the gold that is held in reserves. So also with, of course, the interventions that we're having in the sector, of course, we are going to see transformation in the economy. So we are going to see Ugandans, of course, earning much more. Earlier on, we talked about Ugandans being able to purchase tiles and what, whereas we can purchase them from here. They cannot purchase necklaces. But with time, we shall be able to see Ugandans able to hold their assets in form of gold reserves. So, and also people from the region. So it's something, of course, we have to think about as a country. So let's first let the Mining and Minerals Bill come into place. We'll see how we regulate the refineries. And also, we shall see whether we can amend the Financial Institutions Act, and we will have banks to hold the gold reserves here within the country.
I can see Madam CEO really wants to try and say something. I thought this was the time you would be in total agreement with government, that you can give them their first pieces of bullion to start the reserve.
I think we need to distinguish 2 issues. The gold reserve is actually a prerequisite, or it's a preserve of the central bank. Now, when you talk of bullion banking, which apparently is what we facilitate as a gold refinery, bullion banking is a totally different world, which you can't mix with gold reserves. Gold reserves is actually a preserve of the central bank. And the benefits of having a gold reserve are, are political and economical. In as far as gold, once it's gold as a gold reserve, it stores value. So you're not going to come into things to do with interest, de-dollarization, or the dollar has dropped. Once the central bank has a gold reserve, its currency is backed against the gold, rather than it being backed against the dollar. So this is something that we slowly need to move from and try. Many countries have got their ups and downs with backing against the gold standard. When it comes to bullion banking is whereby we would ask, once the central bank has the capacity to create, to absorb more gold and pile gold into their reserve, then we can move on and say, look guys, open up, we need bullion banking. And bullion banking is a whole new world, from legislation to having, actually it's the biggest leg to industrialization. We need to move our manufacturers from borrowing money backed against machinery, land as a resource, to moving them to using gold as an asset. Use gold upon which you hedge in order to get money to do industrialization. And this makes the economy vibrant. It starts with the central bank.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tem. Certainly that's very enlightening. We now know that these are totally 2 different tracks. And I think that it's a good discussion. You know, members of the public should start asking these questions, should start having these debates to try and forge where we end in terms of having our reserves backed up by gold and other precious resources. I think I'll just come back to Gloria, and in the context of EITI and the refinery business that Sharon has just told us about. Would the initiative cover refining, And would also the initiative move and cover issues like the gold reserve itself and how funds backed against the reserves are utilized by the country? Maybe you can just tell our viewers a little more about that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicholas. If I can just backtrack a bit to give a better understanding of how EITI is going to work in country. When we became members on the 18th of August, the clock started ticking for Uganda. So we actually have a date by which we have to produce our first reports, our first EITI report, and that date is 12th February 2022. So what is expected to be in our report? Our report is supposed to talk about Uganda's extractive sector in terms of, as I had described earlier, the value chain. What are the contracts that are there? How are we producing? How much money are we making? How is that money being spent? So obviously the gold refinery and the gold reserve are key stakeholders in mining. So we definitely have to talk about them. Uganda has signed up to be open. Transparency and accountability are key tenets of EITI. That is what we have signed up to. We have signed up to opening our books. You talked about the public needing to have a greater stake in discussing how things move forward. The public, we are going to support the public in doing that by providing the information. Because as Chris said, this information has not necessarily been in the public domain. As an EITI member, we are obliged to put this information in the public domain. We are obliged to put the contracts in the public domain. We are obliged to put the licenses in the public domain. We are obliged to talk about who the real owners of these companies are. We are obliged to talk about how we are producing. And in the same vein, we also recognize the challenges that are affecting extractives in Uganda. We have challenges in mining, we have challenges in oil and gas, although we have not yet started producing. Some of the challenges that we face in mining are things like, underreporting. Minerals are being produced, but not as much is being reported, and that's down to maybe lack of inspectors. We don't have enough inspectors. So to be able to document the key challenges facing the sector and then find ways of addressing them using the EITI standard, that is how EITI is going to work. But to answer your question specifically, yes, the gold refinery is a key player in mining in Uganda, and we will be talking about it in our report.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that brings me to the other normal concern that happens in situations like this. You have the EITI on the one hand, but you also have, issues around confidentiality of some of these agreements, non-disclosure. We're just wondering, how does that play with EITI? Because, some of the commercial interests will tell you, you cannot disclose what I have agreed to do with you and government. So is your reporting then, limited to only what comes out of that transaction to government and how government utilizes it? Or are you able to actually look behind the contracts and be able to take benefit of it and also report on what happens?
The beauty of EITI is that the stakeholders, the people who are mandated to actually put this information in the public domain, are the companies themselves, the government and civil society. I talked earlier about the multi-stakeholder group, which is like the steering committee for EITI in Uganda. So the multi-stakeholder group has 26 members, and these members come from those three constituencies. We have people from government, we have people from the extractive companies, we have the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum is a member of EITI. We have people from civil society. So as the multi-stakeholder group, they are the owner and the implementer of EITI in Uganda. And it is their job, it is our job, to find a way of making sure that this information is put in the public domain. I'll give you an example of Total, one of our oil partners. Total is actually a member of the EITI International Board. So Total is open to disclosure. I think the challenge we have in Uganda is we previously have not been having these conversations, but it's now time to start having the conversations and actually map out a way that is going to lead us to full disclosure.
Thank you very much. I think it will just be good to know from the private sector, AGR, how do you plan on complying with all these transparency initiatives and the codes that Uganda has signed up to in the context of your business, and knowing that in most instances, you'll have all those confidentiality obligations and challenges to contend with?
I think in the gold sector, we will need to start with demystifying the gold business. There is a lot of mystery, mistrust, economic colonization, if I should use that word, in the gold business. The guys trading in the business, the countries, partners involved in the gold trade are not keen or eager to give too much information of how much they are producing, how much it, and this mystery has fueled smuggling. So with ATI, we would really need them to come on board because we welcome them on board because I see us networking with various countries in order to help demystify the gold business. Because once the gold business is not demystified, it's going to be so difficult to fulfill all the conditions as demanded.
Well, thank you very much. I think
Nicholas, can I just add?
Okay. Please.
The demystification is not limited only to the gold business. I think extractives in Uganda in general, there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misperceptions, a lot of conspiracy theories. So I think that the most important thing that we need to do as a first step is to put the information out there in the open so that people actually know what is contained in the agreements. What do the licenses say? How much are people supposed to, how much is the government supposed to get for what? And how much is actually there? And once we know what the agreement says, then from there we can go on to talk about, is it the right kind of agreement? Is the government getting a raw deal? Are the companies getting a raw deal? But as long as that information is not out there, people will continue to speculate and will continue to have all sorts of theories. So that's what we want to work against.
Okay, thank you, Gloria. I think that would, in itself, also encourage people and give the public the confidence that at least government is not getting a raw deal, but above all, that whatever is due to government is actually being given to government. Because there's always this mutual suspicion where government believes that the private sector is there to maximize profits and value and leave the government with almost nothing. Yeah. Whereas on the private sector side, there's always this belief that these people don't know what we go through to be able to gain exactly. and make the value. Yeah. So having somebody who independently creates that kind of balance in a sector like this is always very, very welcome. I think we'll change a little bit and talk about green energy minerals. And I think, Chris, I'll defer this to you. And just to ask, we've had, a lot of people talk about green energy minerals. What do they exactly mean for our viewers today?
Thank you, Nicholas. Green energy minerals, of course, there's this Paris Agreement on climate change, which requires, of course, the world to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah? Because they are certain targets, about 2 degrees. Then of course, countries have signed up to what portion they will, of course, commit to reduce those emissions. So Uganda is already party to that. And also the government is aware of that, and we're working towards that. So, and there's a change, of course, there's a transition of clean energy. So we are moving from fossil fuels, of course, to renewables. Because fossil fuels, of course, they emit greenhouse gases, because of global warming. So when you move to renewables, you're talking about solar energy, you're talking about wind, and also there's hydro. But solar energy is not like hydro, which runs the whole day. So you need battery storage. And the same thing also hydro. There are times when you have drought. So you have to have storage capacities for these energy sources. So that brings in the battery technologies. So there are those minerals which you use in battery technology. So there are those lithium-ion batteries. So you'll find a mineral like lithium is used in the cathodes of those batteries. And then there's cobalt, there's nickel, there's manganese. Then for the anodes, you find there's graphite. So all those are minerals are termed as green energy minerals. And the country, of course, we have talked largely already about the mineral endowment of the country. And also we have those minerals within the country. Yeah.
Okay, so that's also very encouraging. So we will not be left behind as the world moves towards green energy, and we keep on fossil fuel and other forms of energy. I think we'll also now want to discuss a little bit about the participation of government in some of these initiatives. We know that under the new bill that is being considered, there's been a big drive to try and equate the oil sector or the oil and gas sector to the mineral sector. And there's the notion that the country should have a mining company, a national mining company to hold its interests. We've seen a few countries where this has worked. We don't know whether it's the best thing that we can do as a country in Uganda, but it would be good to take your advice and opinions about the national mineral mining company.
We have talked large about the mining and minerals bill that we are working on. We're first tracking to have a new legal framework for the mining sector. So there are a lot of provisions within the mining bill, such as production sharing. Okay? And then also there are provisions for free carry. Okay? So the national mining company, the Uganda Mining Company, of course, its purpose is being set up, of course, to manage the government's commercial holdings and, of course, the participating interests in mining ventures. So government is not necessarily going to participate in all mining ventures. So it will participate in selected mining ventures, strategic minerals. The minerals are minerals where if you invest in can propel the economy. So there are those minerals, and amongst these, there are the green energy minerals. So if government has seen that these minerals of interest rich, and it will sign into a mineral production sharing agreement with those companies. So the national mining company is very important in this aspect, because also the bill proposes for those provisions, and there's no other way we can manage those provisions which are provided by the bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I think I'll defer to Gloria. Any comments and opinion from the perspective of EITI on a typically managed national mining company and how you would manage their reporting standards and their transparency initiatives?
EITI encourages very much countries to have homegrown solutions. So if a country's desire is to have a national oil company or a national mining company, then EITI International will support this country in doing that by providing examples of international best practice. You've given some examples of where it has worked, where it hasn't worked. So it's really up to the country to decide. But on our part, as Uganda EITI, we will consider the mining company as a state-owned enterprise, as we do the Uganda National Oil Company, and then we look at how much has the state put in, how it relates with the other companies in the sector, and how it's performing its role in the sector. So our role as EITI is simply to report, to assess, and to identify any challenges that may come up, and then also to look for ways to meet those challenges.
Thank you very much. I think back to you, Chris, on the subject of green minerals. It would also just be good to tell our viewers a little bit about where we are in terms of ascertaining the potential of these minerals, the potential of the country in terms of having these minerals, and are there any players who are already mining these minerals, processing them, adding value to them? Are we going to see in the short term the country beginning to produce its own batteries, probably Kira Motors beginning to use our batteries from our own minerals to power their vehicles that they're producing?
Thank you, Nicholas. Before I go on to the potential of the country, the mineral potential of the green energy minerals, I'd like to throw some light on national mining company and of course its adherence to EITI. The national mining company is solely owned by government, but it's to be incorporated within the provisions of the Company Act. So of course it has obligations like any private company, of course to make tax returns, to file annual financial statements, and of course if there are any additional reporting requirements like for EITI, it will have to make it. So of course the national mining company will oblige to all those provisions. Then about the potential and where we are with the green energy minerals. As for cobalt, we have about 5.5 million tons of cobalt established in Kilembe. That's occurring together with the copper in the mine. So, and current and ongoing, of course, is we are fast tracking the procurement for a new developer for the mine to resume mining. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are also other licenses, exploration licenses around the Kilembe copper mine. So there's exploration ongoing for copper and other base metals, including for cobalt. And also where the potential is, of course, very promising. You realize the Kilembe mine is just borders Congo, and Congo is the biggest producer of cobalt in the world. About 90% of the world's cobalt production, 90% comes from Congo. And of course, the country being in the same belt, because it's great potential. And in terms of graphite, we have 1.7 billion tons established reserves of graphite in Orom, in Kitgum. So there's a company which already has done feasibility studies on that. And I already alluded to graphite being an important mineral in the green energy industry. And then for lithium, we have occurrences in the pegmatites of southwestern Uganda. Then you go to central, then also in northeastern Uganda in Karamoja region. So government, of course, intends to follow up on those occurrences. Then nickel. Nickel, we have nickel in northern Uganda and in central, and ongoing intensive drilling operations with private companies ongoing. So from that, you really see that we have got great potential for the green energy minerals. Another mineral I've forgotten, of course, is the rare earth elements. Rare earth elements also find use in rechargeable batteries. And we have 300 million tons. Earlier on, they talked about the aluminous clays. So that is in a place called Makutu in Bujiri. So ongoing currently is a feasibility study to see how to process, because it occurs with the clays, so it's somewhat difficult to extract. So there's an Australian company which is doing the studies. So from that, you can see, of course, the commitment of government in having these green energy minerals exploited for the economic development of the country. And also, of course, for us to have more value reaped from these minerals, the government also is working, of course, in propelling the country's automotive industry. You talked about the Killer Motors company. They're already building a plant. So starting next year, we shall have no importation of buses. Within the cities, we shall have buses which are driven by batteries. So far, they've manufactured one from Nakasongola. Then also to support, of course, the green energy minerals and their development within the country. The government is currently working on putting in place facilities for materials science and extractive metallurgy, and also nanotechnologies. And so the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development is working with the Ministry of Science and Technology on that. So within the next 5 years, we should be having a research facilities for us to be able to see how we can extract these minerals and produce materials which are required for these industries. So there's a lot which is being done by the government on that.
Wow, thank you very much. It's obvious to us that there's a lot that is being done. And I think fora like this provide an avenue for the people to know what is happening. Because most times a lot of these things happen in the boardroom in the ministries, and nobody has any clue what is going on. But I think also, from this discussion, I observe that sometimes different government units work like silos. I would not be surprised to find that with all the wealth of knowledge that DGSM has, probably Kira Motors doesn't even know that you have what you have.
Yeah.
And they're probably planning on getting their next consignment of batteries from some remote area and taking value to another country that could have been utilized in this country. So fora like this, engaging the mining companies and trying to get them to talk as much as possible with in-country opportune buyers would be a very, very good thing to follow through. We saw that in the oil and gas sector in our conference about 2 weeks ago, where even different ministries don't seem to be talking to each other. Yeah. So maybe if there's a takeaway and some kind of feedback that you can take to the government side is to try and have people work out of those silos and cross-pollinate the idea so that we can add value to the sector. Chris, you want to say something?
Yeah, about working in silos, you all know that we are now in the third phase of NDP3. So we have adopted a program-based approach. So we're working across, so we have the mineral development program. Mm-hmm. So in the past, of course, you have the sectors. So you find the energy and mineral sector, so you work mostly along the sector. And now we have the program, the mineral development program, where you have all those institutions, lead institutions, which will contribute to those goals that we've set to achieve within the next 5 years. So, in fact, when this morning, before I came to this meeting, we had a meeting, the first meeting on how to budget for the next financial year. So we had all the ministries, which are key lead agencies in that program, meeting and coming up with actions on how to deliver the mineral development program. So in conceiving NDP3, of course, we realized that the challenge that in the past two NDPs, most MDAs were working in silos. So you find, even within the Ministry Pro, you find the energy director, they know what's happening in minerals. Yeah, so with this program-based approach to working, of course, that's going to be solved. And we're really seeing that challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. That is very reassuring, I believe, to our viewers as well. I think in a discussion like this, you can't finish everything in 45 minutes or so that has been accorded to us. But we thank the organizers nonetheless that we've had the opportunity to be able to share some ideas with the public and get to disseminate information so that people know what is happening. As we close, I know we have a short while, maybe about 15 minutes. I just wanted to give each of you an opportunity just to give us a few takeaways. And we'll start with right next to me, Gloria, representing EITI in the context of moving the mineral sector forward, the future of mining in Uganda.
Yeah.
What is it that you'd want to tell the viewers so that they have a lasting impression of what EITI is going to do for them and where it's going to take the country? Thank you.
I think EITI presents us with a good opportunity to manage extractives well in an open and transparent way, demonstrating that there is nothing to hide. I think that's really important. And it sends out a very positive signal to investors and to anybody who is looking to come to this country to invest, for example, in minerals, that, everything that we do in this sector is public. I think it also sends a strong signal to the public and strengthens the vote of confidence in the government that actually there is nothing to hide and everything is out and above board. But ultimately, what I really want to say is that the extractives, the minerals, the wealth, the natural wealth of a country belongs to its citizens. So it's really important that all the players involved in the sector work towards ensuring that ultimately it's the citizens who benefit from the wealth, from the mineral wealth, from the oil and gas. So ultimately, it's our responsibility as stakeholders in the sector to do whatever it takes on our part to play our role to make sure that happens. And the best way that we can do that is by supporting EITI and making sure we have those conversations around openness, transparency, and accountability.
Thank you very much, Gloria. I will now give an opportunity to Chris Lubangakene. A few parting shots.
Thank you, Nicholas. And, My take-home message, of course, to the delegates and the country and all other viewers is that the country is endowed with vast mineral resources. Of course, a lot of which I've alluded to already. So, and also, we as government are aware of this, and we're trying to do our best to see that the mineral resources are exploited in a way that it benefits the country. But also, I implore the citizens, the country, I mean the people to participate in this. You find most of the investments are coming from out of the country, and whereas we are pushing for local content and national participation. And when we have the mineral resources sustainably developed and they contribute in industrialization, of course we shall have this contributing to social and economic transformation of the country and poverty eradication. And of course, this is very good for the country, and we shall be able to take, of course, the contribution of the sector to the figures of 1960. For instance, in 1960, the mining industry contributed to 30% of the GDP of the country.
Thank you very much, Chris. Certainly that is very encouraging. But I think in the context of local content, maybe a point for the ministry also to take away is that unless you participate in mining, you don't understand how complex sometimes the web is in terms of securing mining interests, keeping them, the reporting obligations. I think these are things that we need to try and disseminate to our people as much as possible and break it down so that even the common person gets to understand what does it take for me to own a mineral. We've had situations where a person actually has, a construction mineral right in his land, and somebody comes from a different part of the world and actually applies for it and tells them, please move so that we can exploit this mineral. So I think we would also call upon government to either translate some of these things to the easiest languages that the people can understand, and also go out and sensitize people around about how the processes work so that they can take benefit. Sharon, I'll just ask you if you have any parting remarks, takeaway for us as regards the matter that you spoke about this evening.
I feel the gold sector is underutilized to the benefit of this country. As African Gold Refinery, we are exporting approximately a ton of gold a month. If we could have the government embrace metal banking, if the central bank can absorb and back up metal banking introduced across the commercial banks, even as a reserve asset among the banking sector, we will not have to export gold. We need to have the capacity to absorb the gold that the refinery is producing daily. Even if the gold is coming from across the region or across the block, let us create our nets. Let us begin to benefit fully. It's not that I'm saying we don't benefit. We do benefit, but let us benefit fully from the operation of the gold refinery in this country. The parameters or the infrastructures that will create full benefit to this country are not very hard to make. It just needs robust decision-making and political will. I know the president has always stood by the refinery and always stood by us, but I think we need to move a step forward, establish the legislature, the legislations there, and then we can absorb. If the central bank and the finance department say, yes, we can take on this, roll it across. It's going to be we are always talking about value addition, but I think we also need to move a step forward and say, yes, when we give value addition, then what? Now that value addition is here, then what? The gold bars are refined. They are within our ambit. These gold bars are very critical in industrialization of this country. Every industrialist, every manufacturer will find that using gold for hedging, for transaction is very, very important in their businesses.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't need to add any more. I think we need to go and buy gold bars and try to reserve our values. Thank you very much, our panelists, dear panelists, for sparing your time to come and share these insights. We don't take that for granted, and we know it's very informative for our audience and very informative for the people who are watching us today. And we hope and pray that as and when the Chamber of Mines and Petroleum calls you or knocks on your doors every often time to come and share your insights, you will always be willing to join us. This is a sector that we're all passionate about. Mining is something that we think will transform our country and put us in the map of the world. So thank you very, very much for making the time. And we wish you, God's choicest blessings as you go back home. And we look forward to continuing with these engagements and making sure that we all keep in good stead and in the right path. With that, I think, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now invite our chairman of the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, Honorable Dr. Elly Karuhanga, to give us his remarks as we close this day. He's going to be joining us by link from his home, but he's been watching this program from morning and making sure that everything goes like clockwork, as he always does. We wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Fellow listeners, my name is Elly Karuhanga, and my job now is to invite His Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, to address us on this, our 9th annual Mineral Wealth Conference, organized by Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum. So, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, members, partners, Your Excellency, Vice President Edward Kiwanuka-Sekandi, we are so delighted to have you to close this, our conference. I want to thank you for always being there for us. This is not your first time to address us. We have definitely been always very proud to receive you and host you. I want you to thank His Excellency the President, who had accepted to come and for asking you to come in his place due to work which you will explain to us. Your Excellency and very fellow viewers, before I invite His Excellency the President to address us, let me say a few words on behalf of the Chamber of Mines and Petroleum. We in the private sector, involved in the sector of mining and exploitation of our mineral resources and energy, are always a little bit unhappy, let me put it that way, that the talent which God put in our hand, like in the Bible, we have not doubled it, we have not tripled it, we have not multiplied it as we should. We've been sitting on it for a long time. I am happy that we are now beginning to see some kind of beginning of interest by all the players, the government, the private sector, the investors, and the wananchi, trying to get to grips with this opportunity. We have with us, and we've been sitting on, Kilembe Mines. Since the former concessionaire left 2 years ago, we have done nothing. This is reckless abandon. We cannot continue this way. I am pleased to hear that by the end of this month, there will be going out for open bidding for whoever will win the concession. I am happy about Sukuru. We had almost thought that it was also going to go down, down, down. I'm pleased here now that we are producing 300 metric tons per month of fertilizer, and that work on iron ore is starting. I am pleased to hear that we have discovered huge quantities of graphite, which will make batteries. Graphite we found in Kitgum. This graphite will enhance capacity for making batteries, and will, coupled with cobalt and copper in Kirembe, if it comes out, Uganda will become a very interesting country and stands to make huge amounts of money for now and for the future. Huge resources of millions and millions of tons of iron ore are sitting with us, both in eastern and western Uganda. We must produce steel. It is reckless of us, reckless abandon again of us, not to exploit and set up a task force to make sure that our iron ore is exploited. Our gold and huge gold reserves being now exported raw, yet we have a refinery. It is painful to see that the government does not make money out of it. This must stop. The improvement on our 3 T's, tungsten and tin and what have you, we must make a factory to add value to our minerals. But we cannot ask that each and every producer with a license must have a factory. Otherwise, it's like asking all the cattle keepers who produce milk, each one of them, to have a pasteurized plant. It's not possible. So we are looking forward to government resolving the issue of ban on exports on small miners. The fact that mining is being pushed by medium and small people, it's important that we organize them so they can lead the way in finding out these minerals. The bill which has been sitting in Parliament on mining has overstayed. In my view, this should be priority. COVID has come. We have to find ways and means of survival as a country. So there's no need for us to sit on a bill like the mining bill. The people who are working in the Ministry of Department of Surveys and Mining, and the colleagues who are working in oil and gas, they earn 60% more money than the ones in mining. That shows you that we are not yet identified minerals as a very big income earner. Yet, out of 2 minerals, like even graphite or gold alone, we'll get more money from it than we shall get from oil and gas. Let's put emphasis on mining. We are ready to create powerful investors coming in. We've just finished discussing with an Indian mining organization. They want to bring their equipment, their technology, their know-how. They want to participate in local content so that we can develop our resources. Your Excellency, Vice President, let me stop there. Let me just hope that the people of Uganda are hearing our drums, we at the Chamber of Mines and Petroleum. We thank you and His Excellency the President and the people in the ministry for seeing that this reckless abandon, as I call it, of our minerals, which just encourages our people in the Ministry of Finance to always jump on planes to go to IMF and World Bank begging for money. The money is sitting in Uganda. We should be the ones giving aid to other people. Your Excellency, the Vice President, my friend, Honorable Edward Kiwanuka-Sekandi, kindly address your viewers and our conference, and I ask you to close it at the end of your speech. Thank you, Vice President, and thank you, viewers, and thank you for being with us all this time, the whole day. Thank you.
Honorable Ministers and Honorable Members of Parliament, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm performing this function as on behalf or on the 9th Annual Mino Wealth Conference. On behalf of His Excellency Yoweri Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda, I wish to appreciate the efforts of Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, the organizers of this event, and the Minister of Energy and Mineral Development for such partnership that brings the limelight to Uganda's mineral sector. Such platforms are crucial for attracting investment, policy formulation, knowledge sharing, and benchmarking. It is now time to rethink our strategy as a nation as we work towards revamping the mineral sector, fundamentally contribute to the country's GDP, especially through value addition. It is our belief that mineral sector has the potential to transform Uganda's economy because of its backward, lateral, and forward linkages with other key sectors of the economy, such as agriculture, energy, trade, and the manufacturing industry. I would like to thank the private sector for their efforts in developing the mining sector, especially in the value addition space. We currently have phosphate and steel projects and development in Tororo, ceramic tiles manufacturing in Kapeka, 4 gold refineries, 4 cement factories, all using raw materials from Uganda. I would also like to thank the several exploration companies doing extensive exploration work to qualify our mineral reserves. I encourage you to continue exploring, developing, and producing mineral wealth, and let us add value here in Uganda. The government of Uganda accords high-level priority to the establishment of an internationally competitive environment for investment in the mineral sector. It is at this point that I thank the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum team for organizing such conference that provides an opportunity for potential investors to gain an insight into Uganda's mineral potential, share experiences and good ideas learned that are used to inform the policy, legal and regulatory frameworks in different countries. Finally, the government is ready to cooperate with the chamber and the private sector to create an enabling environment for mining in Uganda. It is now my honor to declare this conference closed. I thank you.
NBS happening now.
NBS. Always